What's going on, Bleacher Fan Faithful? Jones here from Bleacher Fan Sports, and we are here to discuss Damian Lillard potentially getting traded. It has been the talk of the NBA. I don't want to call it off-season so far, but with the finals approaching, off-season rumors are starting to begin, and Damian Lillard potentially being on the move is absolutely the biggest news out there that doesn't involve actual games being played. So, a lot of reports have started flying recently that Lillard could be considering asking for a trade out of Portland with the news of after the Chauncey Billups signing to be the head coach. That hasn't been the most popular decision with a lot of people around the league, or a lot of fans at least, and Lillard apparently had a big hand in that and is not being received so well. Nevertheless, he hasn't requested out yet. These are all speculative rumors, but it's fun to think about where the potential superstar point guard would end up if he did indeed leave Portland, which at this point does seem unlikely, especially according to the Brian Windhorst report that came out on Tuesday, stating that he hasn't really considered it seriously. He hasn't really thought about it seriously. But if he does ask out, it seems like there's a few options that could be potential suitors, and we're here to discuss 4 teams that right now stand above the rest in terms of fit, in terms of ability to make the trade, whether that be through draft capital, through player assets, or the need at point guard, and the willingness to make the deal, and a team that or location that Lillard might be attracted to. Now, if Lillard does get to the point of requesting out, you assume that the Blazers will do him the favor of asking where he would like to go, and given all that he's done for that franchise, it would be a surprise if they did not do their best to grant his wish of sending him to one of these places or the place that he desires. So you look at the James Harden trade, even though that ended not well at the end, he did end up going to one of the 2 teams that he wanted to go to when he originally requested the trade. So, looking at the Damian Lillard situation, one, you have to think about who can take on his contract, whether that be have the players that make the money to send back and evenly match a deal, or who has the salary cap space to absorb that contract, or at least part of that contract, and not make up for the contracts going back. So, and you have to consider that Dame's going to want to go to a team that gives him a chance to win, gives him a chance to compete for a title, or at least compete for a title soon, or have a path to compete for a title. It's clear it's not happening in Portland. So that, combined with a place he would want to live. You know, Dame is very connected to the Portland, the city in Portland, and the community there. You know, it's part of the reason that a lot of people don't think he will leave, or wants to leave, or ever would leave. And that still very much may be true, and he still may not leave or request a trade. But the fact is, the door has been cracked open now, where it didn't used to be. So team number 1, and these are in no particular order, these are just a list of teams. Team number 1 possibly is the Warriors. The Warriors can put together a pretty decent package. They have 2 first-round picks this year at number 7 and 14 that they could send as part of the package. You have to figure they'll center that package probably around James Wiseman and Andrew Wiggins to make the salaries match up. Wiggins, I believe, is making in the mid-20s. Wiseman on a rookie deal. So you might have to throw a couple of filler players in there, but all of a sudden you take Wiggins and Wiseman and 2 picks from this year and a future pick and maybe a swap, and all of a sudden you have a pretty solid package that's put together for Lillard. You have to, the Rockets got swindled, but they didn't get an incredibly impressive haul for James Harden. So you have to figure, and Lillard and Harden are very comparable in terms of quality of player. You know, same quality of player, roughly the same age, make roughly the same amount of money. So it's a very good baseline to look at, even though the Rockets got swindled. But there's option 1 with the Warriors. Option 2 is the New York Knicks. It's a place that a lot of people think Dame would like to play. They certainly have the assets. They have 2 first-round picks this year, plus they have the Mavericks pick in 2023. They have a lot of first-round picks they can play with in the next 3 or 4 years. Now, when you get to the players, they obviously don't have the star power that some of these other franchises do, but they do have some really intriguing young pieces. it seems like RJ Barrett is untouchable for New York, and that would be understandable. You might even think that Julius Randle is, but even if you keep those two, that would be ideal for New York. They could still put together a pretty decent package around Mitchell Robinson, the young star center, or the young up-and-coming center, Obi Toppin, last year's first-round pick, and Emmanuel Quickley, another first-round pick from last year, who really had a standout rookie season and looks like he can be a real good piece on an NBA team. So when you you put those three guys together, maybe you add in a Frank Ntilikina or a Kevin Knox, and then you start talking draft picks. Three first-round picks maybe, and a pick swap. It's a real haul, and it would put a real dent in the Knicks' future and their ability to build a championship contender. But if you're New York and you can hang on to Julius Randle and RJ Barrett and add Damian Lillard, that might be an avenue they want to explore. If not, they can continue to build the foundation like they have and go from there. But they're probably the furthest away from being a contender. The next team we have is the Sixers. The Sixers actually can probably put together the most interesting package of the bunch, if I had to say. Ben Simmons is another guy that obviously is on the hot seat in terms of getting dealt this offseason. And if you center a package around Ben Simmons, Tyrese Maxey, and Thibault, you have a pretty interesting core of players going on there that you could really use to build around for the future. And then you add in a couple of first-round picks to that, that's a pretty enticing package. And I'm not sure Portland could think about getting a better package than that. You look at a place like Philly, and Dame could really connect with it. He's obviously a hard-working player that a city like Philadelphia is really going to connect with. He really ingrains himself in the community, and that's what Philly's all about. I think that could really be a good match, and it could really leave the Blazers with the type of return that they could be happy with. And then if you take C.J. McCollum and flip him for something else, you can look at a rebuild pretty quickly. You could be on the upshot pretty quickly as the Blazers, for dealing a guy like Dame. You're not going to be a contender next year, but you're certainly not going to be bottom of the barrel like you should be after trading away both your stars. Philly, on the other hand, you don't really gut the roster. You get a clear improvement at point guard with Damian Lillard over Ben Simmons. Sure, you're paying him a lot more, and sure, he's got a few years on Simmons, but all in all, Lillard's a major upgrade over Ben Simmons at the point guard position, and Philly's in win-now mode. This could really make Philly take the next step and make them a true title contender, without having to lose in the second round like they have the past couple of years. So Philly becomes a really interesting option. And the last one is the Boston Celtics. The Celtics are always rumored to be in on these big guys, always, whether it's a free agent or a trade, but they haven't really made the move. They haven't really landed the big fish. Gordon Hayward was kind of their big signing, and it didn't really, amount to anything. And he didn't obviously really want to be there by the end. So it kind of didn't. They haven't really made that big splash yet. They signed Kemba. They signed Kemba, and it didn't work out. So now they're kind of in that spot without a point guard. The downside of making a Damian Lillard trade is, if I'm Portland, I'm not even picking up the phone on a Boston call if they're not including Jaylen Brown. And when you take away Jaylen Brown, obviously you lose the years. Jaylen Brown's much younger, and you have to take on that extra salary from Lillard. And does a Lillard-Tatum combination really make you a title contender? Especially if you're going to lose additional players like probably Marcus Smart, maybe a Robert Williams, a Romeo Langford, those type of guys that are going to be included in this package on top of Jaylen Brown. All of a sudden you have to say, is this deal really worth it for Boston? On top of a pick or two. So that's going to be the struggle with Dame. One, will he request out? Two, will he request out to a specific team or teams? And three, what's the situation? How will that affect the value of him? Similar to what it did with Harden. Will it drop his value significantly? Will there still be a lot of bidders, even though he doesn't want to go there? How much will Portland honor his request of going to those teams if they're not offering the best package? There's so many moving parts, and for something that hasn't even been requested yet, it's clearly we're jumping the gun a little bit talking about it, but that's the NBA offseason. That's NBA free agency. The NBA is a soap opera, and that's what we do. So The Warriors, the Knicks, the Sixers, and the Celtics look like teams that could potentially put together a package strong enough to entice the Blazers to make a deal if Damian Lillard ever requests a trade. Big if on these teams putting together that big of a package, and big if on us knowing what that package will honestly look like at this point. There's just so many question marks, so many unknowns. But when you put together who's got the assets, both draft and players, and who's got the financial flexibility or capability to make this type of move happen, those 4 teams stand out now. Obviously, things could change. Moves could be made in the offseason, and we could get a whole new slate of teams, and these 4 teams couldn't be in it at all. But right now, those are the 4 teams that seem to look like potential possibilities, and it would be really interesting to see what Dame does and how this all plays out.